Tara Maxwell had been leading worship for 7 years, but she'd never seen anyone cry through gospel hymns, like the man in the back pew, hands trembling, shoulders shaking, eyes haunted by ghosts she couldn't see. After the benediction, something pulled her toward him. She knelt beside the stranger, placed her hand on his shoulder, and whispered, "Whatever's breaking you, you don't have to carry it alone." He looked up with eyes full of secrets and said his name was Tommy. It wasn't. His real name was Tim Martinez, and the FBI had 15 federal warrants with that name on them. But Tara didn't know that. She just knew he needed prayer. And that's where everything started, with a gospel song, a lie, and a woman who believed redemption could reach anyone. Tara Maxwell had spent 3 weeks praying about the stranger in the back pew. Tommy, as he'd introduced himself, had become a fixture at Hope Community Church. Wednesday evenings, Sunday mornings, sometimes even Saturday prayer meetings. Always alone, always in the same spot, always looking like a man trying to outrun his own shadow. The church mothers had noticed. Of course they had. Sister Patricia cornered Tara after last Sunday's service, eyebrow raised high enough to touch her church hat. "That boy in the back," Patricia had said, her voice low and suspicious. "He ain't right. Too clean, too quiet. And those shoes he wearing cost more than Pastor James's whole suit." Tara had laughed it off. "He's just hurting, Sister Pat. That's what church is for." Patricia's side eye could have stripped paint. "You be careful, baby girl. Not everybody who walks through them doors comes with pure intentions." But Tara couldn't shake the feeling that Tommy, whoever he really was, needed exactly what she'd offered that first night. Grace without questions, prayer without judgment, a place where his past didn't matter more than his present. He'd started volunteering 3 days after their first conversation. The church's ancient furnace had died on a Tuesday, Detroit December, cold creeping through the sanctuary like judgment, and Tommy had shown up Wednesday evening with tools Tara didn't even know existed. "Let me take a look," he'd said, already heading toward the basement before she could protest. 2 hours later, warmth poured through the vents. The entire congregation had nearly wept with relief during Bible study that night. "How did you?" Tara had started. "Construction," Tommy had said quickly. Too quickly. "You learn to fix everything on a job site. HVAC, plumbing, electrical, all of it." He'd avoided her eyes when he said it. Over the following weeks, Tommy had fixed the leaking baptismal pool, reinforced 3 rotting pews, and somehow acquired, he never explained how, brand new hymnals to replace the ones held together with duct tape and faith. Their conversations had deepened in the spaces between repairs and rehearsals. "You grew up around here?" Tara had asked one evening, watching him sand down a damaged pew rail with careful precision. "Few blocks over." Tommy kept his eyes on his work. "Rough neighborhood. Lost a lot of people to these streets." His hands had trembled when he said it. "I lost my daddy when I was 16. Tara had offered softly. "Wrong place, wrong time. Stray bullet during a drive-by on Cicero Avenue." That had made Tommy look up. Really look at her. "I'm sorry," he'd said, and something in his voice suggested he understood that specific kind of grief. The random, senseless violence kind. The kind that haunts you because there's no reason, no closure, no justice. "Gospel music saved me," Tara had continued. "Gave me somewhere to put all that rage and sadness. Made me believe God could still use broken things to make something beautiful." Tommy had stared at her for a long moment, his jaw working like he was fighting tears. "You really believe that?" he'd finally asked. "That broken things can be beautiful?" "I have to believe it," Tara had said. "Otherwise, what's the point of any of this?" He'd gone back to sanding, but she'd seen him wipe his eyes when he thought she wasn't looking. The shift had happened during a Sunday morning service in late January. Tara had been leading the choir through "Take Me to the King," a song about desperation, about having nowhere else to turn when she'd seen Tommy in the back pew, completely undone, not quiet tears this time. Full body sobs, shoulders shaking, face buried in his hands. Something in her chest had cracked. After the benediction, after the congregation had filtered out into the cold morning, Tara had found him still sitting there, alone in the empty sanctuary, broken in a way that went beyond words. She'd sat down beside him, not touching, just present. "I can't keep doing this," Tommy had whispered. "Doing what?" "Lying to you." His voice had cracked. "Pretending I'm someone I'm not." Tara's heart had hammered. "Then tell me the truth." But he'd looked at her with such desperate fear that she'd reached for his hand instead. "Or don't," she'd said softly. "Not yet, not until you're ready." He'd turned toward her then. eyes red and searching. "You don't even know me," Tommy had said. "You don't know what I've done, what I've been part of." "I know you cry during hymns," Tara had replied. "I know you fixed our church's heating so elderly folks wouldn't freeze during Bible study. I know you show up every time these doors open, like you're looking for something you lost. What if I can't find it?" His voice had been barely audible. "Then we'll keep looking together." That's when he'd kissed her. Tender, desperate, sacred in a way Tara had never experienced. His hand cupped her face like she was something precious, something breakable, something he didn't deserve to touch. When they'd pulled apart, Tommy had whispered against her lips, "I see you trying to save me, Tara, but what if I'm too far gone?" "Nobody's too far gone," she'd said. "That's kind of the whole point of grace." He'd rested his forehead against hers, breathing unsteady. "I have to tell you something," Tommy had started. "My real name," but his phone had vibrated. Once, twice, insistent. He'd pulled it out, gone pale, and stood abruptly. "I have to go." His voice had shifted harder, colder. Whoever, Tommy the construction worker, was disappeared behind something darker. "I'm sorry. I can't be here right now." "Wait." Tara had reached for him, but he'd already been moving toward the door. Phone pressed to his ear, his entire body language transformed into something dangerous. She'd caught only fragments of his conversation. "I said I'm out. Don't care what Bruno wants. Not doing this anymore." The sanctuary door had slammed behind him. Tara had sat alone in the empty church, her lips still tingling from their kiss, her heart hammering with questions she couldn't answer. Sister Patricia's warning echoed in her mind. Not everybody who walks through them doors comes with pure intentions. But Tara had felt Tommy's hands trembling when he'd touched her face, had seen his tears during worship, had watched him weep like a man begging for redemption. Whatever secrets he was carrying, whatever past he was running from, she'd meant what she said. Nobody was too far gone for Grace. Even if Grace had to kneel down in the dirt to reach them. Even if Grace had to risk everything to save them. Even if Grace looked like loving a man whose real name she didn't even know. Tara Maxwell closed her eyes and prayed for Tommy, or whoever he really was. She had no idea that 3 blocks away, Tim Martinez was making the biggest mistake of his criminal career, trying to walk away from Don Bruno's operation. And Don Bruno didn't let people walk away. The thing about gospel music is that it doesn't let you hide. Tara had learned that truth at 16 when her father's casket was carried down the aisle of this very church, and she'd learned it again every Sunday since. Music had a way of cracking people open, exposing the raw places they tried to keep locked away, but she'd never seen it work on anyone quite like Tommy. 3 Sundays after their kiss in the empty sanctuary, Tara stood at the front of Hope Community Church, leading the choir through "Take Me to the King." The song was a prayer set to melody, a desperate plea for divine intervention when human strength ran out. Sister Patricia's alto voice wrapped around Tara's soprano like smoke, and the congregation swayed in their pews, hands raised, some already crying. Tara's eyes found Tommy in his usual spot, back pew, aisle seat, escape route clear, and what she saw made her nearly miss her cue. He was coming apart, not the quiet, controlled tears she'd witnessed before. This was something different, something primal. His face was buried in his hands, shoulders heaving with sobs so violent she could see them from 40 feet away. The expensive watch on his wrist caught the stained glass light as his whole body shook. "Take me to the king. I don't have much to bring," Tara sang, but she was singing directly to him now, pouring every ounce of her gift into reaching whatever was breaking inside him. "My heart is torn in pieces. It's my offering." Tommy looked up, and their eyes locked across the sanctuary. The pain in his face was so raw it felt obscene to witness, like watching someone bleed out emotionally in real time. Whatever war he'd been fighting inside himself, he was losing, badly. The song ended. Pastor James gave the benediction. The congregation filtered out into the February cold, calling goodbyes and making plans for Bible study. Sister Patricia gave Tara a knowing look that clearly said, "I told you that boy was trouble," but she left without comment. And then it was just Tara and Tommy in the empty sanctuary. She approached slowly, her heels echoing on the worn wooden floors. He hadn't moved from his seat, hadn't even looked up. His hands were clasped between his knees like he was physically holding himself together. "Tommy," Tara said softly, sliding into the pew beside him. "Don't." His voice came out strangled. "Don't be kind to me right now. I don't deserve it. That's not how kindness works." She didn't touch him yet, just sat close enough that he could feel her presence. "You don't earn it. You just receive it." He let out a sound that might have been a laugh or a sob. "You make it sound so simple." "It is simple. We just make it complicated." Tommy finally turned to look at her. And God, those eyes, dark and haunted, and full of secrets that were clearly eating him alive from the inside out. "I can't keep doing this," he whispered. "Doing what?" "Lying to you." His voice cracked on the last word. "Pretending I'm someone I'm not. Coming here like I deserve to sit in this church. Like I deserve to—" He cut himself off, jaw clenching. Tara's heart hammered against her ribs. "Then tell me the truth." The fear that flashed across his face was so visceral she almost reached for him. Almost. But something told her to wait, to let him work through whatever internal battle he was fighting. "What if the truth ruins everything?" Tommy asked. "What if you look at me differently? What if you—" His breath hitched. "What if you stop looking at me altogether?" "Try me," Tara said simply. But instead of speaking, Tommy reached for her face with trembling hands. His thumb traced her cheekbone with a gentleness that seemed at odds with the violence she sensed coiled inside him, like he was terrified he might break her just by touching her. "I don't know how to be what you see when you look at me," he whispered. "I don't know how to be good." "Then let me see you anyway," Tara replied. "Not the good version, just you." That's when he kissed her. It was nothing like she'd imagined a first kiss would be. There was nothing tentative or playful about it. This was desperate, drowning, like he was trying to breathe her in and let her save him all at once. His hand cradled the back of her head, the other gripping her waist like she might disappear if he didn't hold on tight enough. Tara kissed him back with everything she had, tasting salt from his tears and something darker she couldn't name. Her fingers tangled in his hair, pulling him closer, trying to communicate through touch what words couldn't quite reach. "I see you. I choose you. Even if I don't know all of you yet." When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Tommy rested his forehead against hers. "I see you, Tommy," Tara whispered. "I see the man you're trying to become. I see—" "My real name," he started, but his phone vibrated violently in his pocket. Once, twice, 3 times in rapid succession. Tommy went completely still. The man who'd just been kissing her with desperate tenderness disappeared behind something cold and dangerous. He pulled out his phone, glanced at the screen, and all the color drained from his face. "I have to go." He was already standing, already moving. "What?" "Tommy, wait." But he was halfway to the door. Phone pressed to his ear. His entire body language transformed into something predatory and tense. "I said I'm out," she heard him say, voice hard as iron. "I don't care what no. Tell Bruno I'm done." The sanctuary door slammed shut behind him, leaving Tara alone with her racing heart and 1,000 unanswered questions. Tommy Tim Martinez drove to the warehouse on Ashland Avenue knowing this conversation could very well be his last. Don Bruno didn't summon people for friendly chats. When Bruno called, you came. And when you tried to walk away from his operation, you usually didn't walk anywhere again. The warehouse was exactly what you'd expect. Corrugated metal walls, flickering fluorescent lights, and the kind of shadows that had probably witnessed too many things that would never see daylight. 3 of Bruno's men flanked the entrance, Luis, Jackson, and someone new Tim didn't recognize, all armed, all watching him with the casual alertness of apex predators. Don Bruno stood in the center of the space, examining a shipment manifest like it was the morning paper. He was a compact man, maybe 5'7", but he carried himself like someone who'd never lost a fight that mattered. Silver hair slicked back, expensive suit that probably cost more than most people's cars, and eyes that could calculate your net worth or your life expectancy in under 10 seconds. "Timmy," Bruno said without looking up. "You've been distracted lately." It wasn't a question. "I've been handling business," Tim replied evenly. "Have you?" Now Bruno looked up, and his smile didn't reach his eyes. "Because I'm hearing stories. Stories about my best distributor spending his Wednesday nights at church. Stories about him fixing furnaces and singing hymns. Stories about a pretty little choir director with a voice like an angel." Tim's blood went cold. "That's personal," he said carefully. "Nothing's personal when you work for me." Bruno set down the manifest and walked closer. "Everything you do reflects on this organization, and right now you're reflecting weakness. I'm handling my responsibilities. Are you?" Bruno's voice dropped to something dangerous. "Because Luis here tells me you missed the Cicero pickup last Sunday. Said you were unavailable. Sunday morning, Timmy. Church hours." Tim said nothing. What could he say? "That church girl is making you soft," Bruno continued, circling him like a shark. Soft gets people hurt in our line of work. Soft gets people erased. And I can't have one of my top earners getting erased because he caught feelings for some gospel-singing do-gooder. She has nothing to do with business. She has everything to do with business, if she's making you miss drops. Bruno stopped directly in front of him. Let me be clear, because I like you, Timmy. I really do. You've made me a lot of money. But if I have to choose between my operation and your little church romance, I'm choosing my operation, every single time. The threat hung in the air like smoke. Are we clear? Bruno asked. Tim thought about Tara's hands on his face. Her whispered words, I see you. The way she looked at him like he was worth saving. Crystal, Tim said. Good. Bruno smiled and clapped him on the shoulder. Now get out of here. And Timmy? Make better choices, for everyone's sake. Tim didn't go back to church. Not that Wednesday. Not the following Sunday. Not for 3 agonizing weeks. He'd driven past Hope Community Church 17 times, yes. He'd counted but never stopped. Never went inside. Just circled the block like a ghost haunting his own redemption. Because Bruno was right about one thing. Tim had put Tara in danger just by getting close to her. And if Bruno decided she was a problem, she'd disappear. That's how these things worked. You didn't get warnings. You didn't get second chances. You just got gone. So Tim did the only thing he could think of to protect her. He stayed away. It was killing him. Every Wednesday evening, he'd sit in his car 3 blocks from the church, close enough to hear the faint sound of gospel music drifting through the cold Chicago air, Tara's voice rising above everything else, clear and pure and absolutely devastating. Some nights he'd cry sitting there. Other nights he'd just grip the steering wheel until his knuckles went white, fighting every instinct that screamed at him to walk through those doors and beg her forgiveness. His phone had 43 missed calls from a number he didn't recognize. He knew it was Tara. She'd probably gotten his number from the volunteer contact sheet. He couldn't answer. Couldn't hear her voice asking where he'd been, why he'd disappeared, if she'd done something wrong, because she hadn't done anything wrong. She'd just made the catastrophic mistake of showing kindness to a man who didn't deserve it, a man whose world was so dark that her light couldn't reach it without getting swallowed whole. 3 blocks away, Tara Maxwell knelt at the altar of Hope Community Church and prayed for a man named Tommy, who'd kissed her like she was salvation itself, and then vanished like smoke. She didn't know his real name was Tim Martinez. She didn't know he was wanted by the FBI. She didn't know that every second she thought about him, she was one step closer to a danger she couldn't possibly imagine. But she prayed anyway, because that's what Tara did. She prayed for lost causes and broken men and redemption that seemed impossible. She just didn't know how impossible it was about to become. As the story proceeds, we will like to know where you're listening from. Drop a comment, and don't forget to subscribe. Thank you for your kindness. Tim Martinez had made a lot of bad decisions in his 32 years. Dropping out of college to help his younger brother. Getting involved with Don Bruno's crew when money got tight. Moving from small-time distribution to major arms trafficking because the pay was too good to refuse. Each choice had been another step away from the man he'd wanted to be, and toward the man he'd become. But walking back into Hope Community Church on a Sunday morning, knowing the FBI had probably tailed him, knowing Bruno's people were watching his every move, knowing this could end with someone getting hurt that might have been the worst decision of all, or the best. Tim still hadn't figured out which. He slipped into the sanctuary during the opening hymn, taking his usual spot in the back pew like the past 3 weeks of absence had never happened. Like he hadn't spent 21 days circling this building like a satellite trapped in orbit. Like he hadn't listened to 43 voicemails from Tara that he'd been too much of a coward to return. The moment he sat down, Tara's voice faltered. She was at the front leading the choir through Waymaker, and when her eyes found him in the back row, she nearly stopped singing altogether. Sister Patricia had to cover the next verse while Tara visibly collected herself, but she didn't look away. Not for the entire song. She sang directly to him, and every lyric felt like an accusation wrapped in grace. Waymaker, miracle worker, promise keeper, light in the darkness. Tim didn't deserve any of those things. The service continued. Pastor James preached about the prodigal son because of course he did. The universe had a sick sense of humor, and Tim sat there with a loaded Glock pressed against his lower back and a confession burning in his throat that he didn't know how to voice. After the benediction, the congregation filtered toward the fellowship hall for coffee and gossip. Sister Patricia shot Tim a look that could have melted steel. A few of the church mothers whispered behind their hands, their disapproval palpable even from 40 feet away. But Tara walked straight toward him, her burgundy dress swishing with each determined step, and the expression on her face was something between relief and fury. 3 weeks, she said when she reached his pew. Not hello, not welcome back. Just 3 weeks, Tommy. No call, no text, no explanation. Just gone. End quote. I know. Tim stood, his shoulder screaming from the tension he'd been carrying. I'm sorry. I needed to. To what? Disappear? Ghost me like I meant nothing? Her voice cracked. And God, that hurt worse than any bullet. I thought you were dead. I thought. She cut herself off, blinking back tears. Why are you here? Because I need to tell you the truth. Tim glanced around the sanctuary. A few stragglers remained, but most had moved toward the fellowship hall. They had maybe 5 minutes of privacy. My name isn't Tommy, and I'm not a construction worker. The sanctuary doors burst open. Don Bruno walked in, flanked by 2 men. Tim recognized immediately Luis and Razor. Both were armed shoulder holsters visible beneath their jackets, and neither bothered pretending this was a friendly visit. Timmy, Bruno called out, his voice echoing through the sacred space like blasphemy. We need to talk about your attendance record. Every head in the sanctuary turned. The handful of remaining church members froze. Sister Patricia, halfway to the fellowship hall, stopped dead in her tracks. Bruno. Tim stepped in front of Tara instinctively. This isn't the place. Oh, I think it's the perfect place. Bruno's smile was pure venom. Since you've been spending so much time here lately, thought I'd see what all the fuss was about. His eyes slid to Tara, and Tim felt his blood turn to ice. This her? Bruno asked. The choir girl who's got you singing hymns instead of handling business. Leave her out of this, Tim said quietly. Can't do that, Timmy. See? You made her part of this when you decided she was more important than your responsibilities. When you started missing drops. When you went soft. Tara's hand gripped Tim's arm. Tommy, what is he talking about? His name's not Tommy, sweetheart, Bruno said before Tim could respond. It's Tim Martinez. And he's been lying to you since the day you met him. The sanctuary doors burst open again, this time from the side entrance, and suddenly there were men in FBI windbreakers flooding the space, weapons drawn, voices shouting commands that overlapped into chaos. FBI, hands where we can see them. Everyone down now. Drop your weapons. Everything happened at once. Luis went for his gun. Razor moved toward the altar. Bruno's hand disappeared inside his jacket. The FBI agents were shouting, converging from multiple entry points, their tactical gear stark against the stained glass and worn wood pews. And Tim saw Bruno's gun clear his holster, saw the barrel swing toward the agents but arc dangerously close to where Tara stood, frozen in shock. He didn't think. Tim threw himself over Tara, driving her to the floor behind the pew just as gunfire erupted. The crack of bullets was deafening in the enclosed space. Nothing like the movies, just pure concussive sound that rattled your teeth and stopped your heart. Something hot and sharp punched through Tim's left shoulder, spinning him sideways. He felt the impact before the pain registered like someone had slammed a hammer into his collarbone. Blood bloomed across his white dress shirt in an expanding crimson stain. Stay down, Tim shouted at Tara, covering her body with his even as his left arm went numb. Don't move. More gunfire. Screaming. Someone Sister Patricia maybe was praying loudly in the corner. The fellowship hall doors burst open and church members scattered like startled birds. Tim looked up just in time to see Luis go down hard, tackled by 2 agents. Razor's gun clattered across the floor, and Don Bruno, who'd ruled the South Side with an iron fist for 15 years, was face down on the altar steps with 3 agents on top of him, zip ties securing his wrists. Tim Martinez, an agent in tactical gear, appeared above them, weapon trained directly on Tim's head. Hands where I can see them. Now. I'm hit, Tim managed through gritted teeth. Left shoulder. Guns in my waistband. Back right side. Don't move. 2 more agents converged. One yanked Tim's Glock from his waistband while another zip-tied his wrists behind his back with brutal efficiency. The pain in his shoulder exploded into white-hot agony that made his vision swim. Beneath him, Tara was shaking. Or maybe he was shaking. He couldn't tell anymore. Ma'am, are you injured? An agent was pulling Tara out from under Tim, checking her for wounds. Ma'am, can you hear me? I'm fine, Tara whispered, but her eyes were locked on Tim, on the blood soaking through his shirt, on the federal agents hauling him to his feet. Tommy. What? His name is Tim Martinez, the lead agent announced loudly, and Tim watched every phone in the sanctuary come up, recording. He's wanted on 15 federal charges, including racketeering, arms trafficking, and conspiracy. Mr. Martinez, you have the right to remain silent. No. Tara's voice cut through the chaos. No. His name is Tommy. He's a construction worker. He fixes furnaces. Her voice broke. Tommy, tell them they're wrong. Tim really looked at her and saw the exact moment she understood. The way his jaw clenched. The way he couldn't hold her gaze. The way he didn't deny a single word the agent had said. Oh my God, Tara breathed. Oh my God, you lied. This whole time She staggered backward like she'd been physically struck. Who are you? I tried to tell you, Tim said desperately as the agents dragged him toward the door. Blood dripped from his fingertips, leaving a trail across the carpet. Today, I came here to tell you everything. To warn you. To what? Use me? Tara's voice went sharp, almost hysterical. Was any of it real? The crying during hymns? The fixing the furnace? The kiss? Was any of it actually real? Or was I just some cover story for a criminal? It was real, Tim said. And he didn't care that 20 phones were recording this, didn't care that the FBI was listening, didn't care about anything except making her understand. Everything with you was the only real thing in my entire life. I love you, Tara. That's the truth. That's the only truth that matters. Don't! She screamed it, and the raw anguish in her voice physically hurt worse than the bullet in his shoulder. Don't you dare say that to me. Don't you dare make this about love when you built our entire relationship on lies. The lead agent yanked Tim toward the exit. Outside, Tim could hear news helicopters, police sirens, the organized chaos of a major federal bust going down in real time. Pastor James had appeared from somewhere, looking shell-shocked. Sister Patricia was openly weeping, and Tara's mother, a woman Tim had never met but recognized from photos, burst through the fellowship hall doors, took one look at the scene, and went ballistic. Get away from my daughter, she shrieked, pulling Tara into her arms. You get that criminal away from her. Tara, baby, are you hurt? Did he hurt you? Mom, Tara's voice was barely audible. We're leaving. Right now. You're never speaking to him again, do you hear me? Never. I don't care what you think you felt for him. That man is a liar and a criminal, and you are never seeing him again. Tim let them drag him out. Let them shove him into a waiting federal vehicle. Let them process him, photograph him, inventory the bullet wound that was still bleeding sluggishly through the hasty bandage they'd applied. Through the vehicle window, he watched news cameras swarm the church, watched reporters shove microphones at fleeing congregation members, watched the footage that would be all over national news within the hour. FBI agents emerging from Hope Community Church with zip-tied suspects, blood on the altar, a gospel choir director crying in her mother's arms. The chyron at the bottom of the screen read, Major arms trafficking bust at Southside Church. Tim Martinez arrested. By nightfall, every news station in America would know exactly what happened. A wanted criminal had infiltrated a church, seduced the choir director. Nearly gotten innocent people ended during a federal raid. What they wouldn't show was the rest of it. The way Tim had actually wept during those hymns because Tara's voice made him believe in second chances. The way he'd fixed that furnace because seeing elderly folks shiver in church had physically hurt. The way he'd loved her with every broken piece of his worthless soul. None of that would make the news. In her mother's house 3 miles away, Tara Maxwell sat on the couch she'd grown up on, wrapped in a blanket that still smelled like her childhood, and watched news footage of Tommy being loaded into an ambulance. Tim Martinez, arms trafficker, racketeer, federal fugitive, the man she'd kissed in the sanctuary, the man she'd prayed for. The man who'd taken a bullet to protect her even while lying about everything else. Her phone wouldn't stop ringing. News outlets, church members, friends from college who'd seen the footage. Everyone wanted a statement. Everyone wanted to know. Did you know? Were you involved? How could you not see it? Tara turned off her phone and cried until she had nothing left. Sister Patricia's words echoed in her mind. Not everybody who walks through them doors comes with pure intentions. But the worst part, the part that made Tara feel like she was drowning, was that she'd seen his intentions. She'd seen the guilt and the desperation and the genuine desire for redemption. She'd seen a man who wanted to be better. She just hadn't seen that he was already much, much worse. Tara had been staring at her bedroom ceiling for 48 hours straight when her apartment tried to end her. She'd barely moved since her mother had finally left after the 17th lecture about dangerous men and poor judgment. And what were you thinking, baby girl? Leaving Tara alone in the small studio apartment she'd rented 3 years ago. The same apartment where she'd played "What a Friend We Have in Jesus" on repeat while grading choir auditions. The same apartment where she'd practiced Sunday's worship set while cooking instant ramen. The same apartment where she'd imagined, just once, what it might be like if Tommy, Tim, whoever he was, came over for dinner like a normal person, dating a normal person in a normal relationship, built on something other than federal crimes and catastrophic lies. Her phone had died 6 hours ago. She hadn't bothered charging it. The news had been brutal. Every station running the same footage on loop. Tim being hauled out of Hope Community Church in zip ties, blood soaking through his white shirt. Don Bruno face down on the altar. Tara herself, barely visible in the background, looking like her entire world had just detonated. The choir girl and the criminal, one headline had read. Gospel singer's secret romance with FBI's most wanted, another proclaimed. Her personal favorite had been, Did She Know? Church director's dangerous love affair. Sister Patricia had called 14 times. Pastor James had left 7 voicemails asking if she was okay, if she needed anything, if she wanted to talk. The church mothers had apparently organized a prayer circle specifically for her spiritual recovery from deception. Tara had ignored all of it. Because the worst part, the part that made her want to crawl out of her own skin, was that she missed him, despite everything. Despite the lies and the federal charges and the fact that his real name wasn't even Tommy, she missed the way he'd cried during hymns. The way his hands had trembled when he'd touched her face. The desperate tenderness in his kiss. How do you grieve someone who never actually existed? She was contemplating this question, staring at the water stain on her ceiling that vaguely resembled Illinois when she smelled smoke. Not food burning on a stove smoke. Not someone's cigarette drifting through the vents smoke. Chemical smoke. Gasoline smoke. The kind of smoke that makes your hindbrain scream run before your conscious mind catches up. Tara bolted upright just as orange light flickered under her apartment door. No, she whispered. No, no, no. The smoke alarm shrieked to life, and suddenly she could hear screaming from the hallway, footsteps thundering past her door. Someone yelling, "Fire! Everyone out!" Tara grabbed her phone dead and her keys and ran for the door. The metal knob was already hot to the touch. She yanked her hand back with a hiss of pain, wrapped her sleeve around her palm, and tried again. The door opened onto hell. The hallway was engulfed. Flames crawled up the walls like living things, eating through cheap paint and drywall with terrifying speed. Black smoke rolled across the ceiling, thick and choking. Tara could barely see 3 feet in front of her. The stairs. She needed to get to the stairs. She dropped low, remembering some half-forgotten fire safety video from elementary school, and crawled through the heat. Her hands hit broken glass, someone's shattered window, and pain lanced through her palms. Blood mixed with soot. But she kept moving because stopping meant dying, and she wasn't ready to die. Not like this. Not for this. The stairwell door was blessedly cool. Tara shoved through it and half fell down 3 flights of stairs, emerging onto the street where fire trucks were already arriving. Neighbors in bathrobes gathering on the sidewalk. Someone crying about their cat still being inside. Tara collapsed on the curb, coughing so hard she thought her lungs might come up. Her hands were burned, not badly, but enough that blisters were already forming across her palms. Her clothes reeked of smoke. Her hair was singed on one side. A paramedic appeared, wrapping a blanket around her shoulders, checking her vitals, asking questions she couldn't quite process. "Ma'am, do you know how the fire started?" Tara shook her head. But 3 hours later, when the fire marshal pulled her aside with a grim expression, she learned the truth. "Molotov cocktail through your window," he said. "Someone targeted your specific unit. This wasn't an accident, Miss Maxwell. This was arson." The Chicago Police Department detective who interviewed her at the hospital was blunt. "Miss Maxwell, you were involved with Tim Martinez. He worked for Don Bruno's operation. Bruno still got people on the outside. This was retaliation. They were trying to send Martinez a message." "What message?" Tara asked through the haze of pain medication they'd given her for the burns. The detective's expression was grim. "That they can reach the people he cares about." Tim Martinez learned about the fire from a guard at Cook County Jail who took entirely too much pleasure in delivering the news. "Your little church girlfriend almost got herself barbecued last night," the guard said, sliding Tim's breakfast tray through the slot. "Heard Bruno's crew firebombed her building. She made it out, but just barely. Shame. Pretty girl like that." Tim's vision went white. He was across the cell in half a second, slamming his shoulder into the door hard enough that pain exploded through his bullet wound. "What? Where is she? Is she okay?" Where is she? Calm down, Martinez. She's fine. Some burns on her hands, smoke inhalation. Could have been worse. Could have been worse. Tim slid down the cell wall, his injured shoulder screaming, and for the first time since Carlos's funeral, he completely broke. Not quiet tears, not controlled grief. This was raw, animalistic sobbing that came from somewhere so deep he didn't know he could make sounds like that. Bruno had gone after Tara. Because of him. Because Tim had been stupid enough to fall in love. Stupid enough to think he could walk away. Stupid enough to believe he could protect her by just disappearing. And now she'd nearly been ended in her own home. Tim didn't remember making the decision. He just found himself shouting for the guards, demanding to speak to his lawyer, refusing to shut up until they let him make a phone call. His public defender, an overworked woman named Rebecca Chen, who looked like she survived on coffee and spite, arrived within 2 hours. "I want to make a deal," Tim said before she'd even sat down. "Mr. Martinez, I'd advise. I'll give them everything." His voice was hoarse from screaming. Every name, every location, every transaction, every detail of Bruno's entire operation. Complete cooperation, full testimony, whatever they want. Rebecca blinked. That's a significant offer. In exchange for what? A reduced sentence? No. Tim leaned forward. In exchange for witness protection for Tara Maxwell. Full protection, new identity, relocation, everything. I don't want a reduced sentence. I don't want anything for myself. Just protect her. Mr. Martinez, you're looking at 20 to 30 years. If you cooperate fully, we could potentially get that down to, I don't care. Tim's hands were shaking. Bruno tried to end her because of me. His people are still out there. She's not safe. So I'll give the FBI everything they need to dismantle his entire network, but only if they guarantee her safety. That's the deal. Non-negotiable. Rebecca stared at him for a long moment. You're willing to serve the full sentence just to protect a woman who probably never wants to see you again? Tim thought about Tara's voice singing, "Take me to the king," the way she'd knelt beside him without fear, the way she'd kissed him like he was worth saving. Yes, he said simply. The trial of United States v. Timothy Martinez, Donald Bruno, Luis Reyes, and Raymond Razor Chen became the biggest federal case Chicago had seen in a decade. Court TV covered it gavel to gavel. Every major news outlet sent correspondents. The prosecution's witness list read like a who's who of federal law enforcement agents, informants, forensic accountants, and Tara Maxwell. She'd been subpoenaed as a character witness, despite her lawyer's protests. The prosecution wanted to establish that Tim had used his relationship with her as cover for his criminal activities. The defense, what remained of it after Tim had flipped, wanted to establish that he was capable of genuine feeling, genuine remorse. Tara didn't want to establish anything. She just wanted this nightmare to end. But 3 months after the fire, she found herself sitting in a federal courthouse, right hand raised, swearing to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. The prosecutor was a woman in her 50s with severe glasses and an expression suggesting she'd personally prosecuted war criminals before breakfast. "Miss Maxwell," she began, "you were in a romantic relationship with the defendant Tim Martinez. Is that correct?" "Yes." Tara's voice was steady, but her burned palms were sweating beneath the bandages. "And during this relationship, did Mr. Martinez ever disclose his real name to you?" "No." "Did he disclose his occupation?" "No. He said he was a construction worker." "Did he disclose that he was wanted by the FBI on 15 federal charges?" "No." The prosecutor paused for effect. "Miss Maxwell, did Mr. Martinez deceive you?" The courtroom went silent. Tara looked at Tim for the first time since she'd entered the room. He was thinner than she remembered, his left arm in a sling from the shoulder wound, wearing an orange jumpsuit that made him look both dangerous and heartbreakingly vulnerable. His eyes met hers, and she saw no expectation there. No plea for mercy, just resignation. "Yes," Tara said clearly. "He deceived me." She saw something in Tim's expression crack. "But," Tara continued, and the prosecutor's head snapped up, "I also watched a man carry unbearable guilt. I watched him weep during hymns like the music was physically hurting him. I watched him volunteer to fix our church's broken heating system in December in the freezing cold so elderly folks wouldn't have to choose between worship and warmth. I watched him show up every single service for weeks, looking like he was fighting a war inside himself." The prosecutor opened her mouth, but Tara wasn't finished. "Did he lie about his name?" "Yes." "His occupation?" "Yes." His past? Absolutely. But the guilt I saw? The desperation for something better? The way he looked at redemption like it was water and he was dying of thirst? That wasn't a lie. You can't fake that kind of pain. I know because I've been leading worship for 7 years, and I've seen every kind of broken person there is. Tim Martinez was a liar and a criminal, but he was also someone desperate to be saved. And maybe that doesn't matter in a court of law. Maybe the law doesn't care about the difference between someone who's evil and someone who's done evil things while hating themselves for it. But I saw the difference, and I think that matters. The courtroom was absolutely silent. The prosecutor tried to recover. Miss Maxwell, isn't it possible that this was all an act? That Mr. Martinez simply used you for cover? It's possible, Tara admitted. But I don't think it was. Because if it was an act, why did he take a bullet for me? Why did he throw himself over me during that raid when he could have run? Why did he, her voice caught, why did he give up any chance at a reduced sentence just to get me witness protection? Tim's lawyer, Rebecca Chen, looked like Christmas had come early. The prosecutor looked like she'd bitten into something sour. No further questions, she said tersely. The jury deliberated for 6 hours. Tim Martinez was found guilty on all counts: racketeering, arms trafficking, conspiracy, weapons charges. The judge sentenced him to 12 years in federal prison with possibility of parole after 8. Don Bruno got life without parole. Luis and Razor got 20 years each. When the verdict came down, Tim looked almost relieved. Tara watched from the gallery as they led him away. He glanced back once, found her in the crowd, and mouthed 2 words, "Thank you." She didn't respond, didn't nod, didn't acknowledge it, but she didn't look away either. That night, back in her mother's house, her apartment was still uninhabitable. Tara received a letter via her lawyer. The handwriting was terrible, like someone had written it with their non-dominant hand. "Tara, I don't expect you to read this. I don't expect you to forgive me. I don't expect anything except that you'll be safe now, which is all that matters. Everything I told you about being trapped, about losing people to these streets, about wanting out, that was true. Everything I felt when I was with you, that was true too. The lies were about who I'd been, but what I was trying to become when I was with you, that was real. I love you. That's the only truth that's ever mattered. I hope you find someone who deserves you, someone who doesn't come with federal charges and bullet wounds, someone good. I hope you keep singing. The world needs your voice." Tim. Tara read it 3 times, then carefully folded it and placed it in her Bible right between Psalms and Proverbs, where all the hard truths lived. She didn't write back, but she didn't throw it away either. The first time Tara Maxwell visited Tim Martinez in federal prison, Sister Patricia tried to stage an intervention. "Baby girl, have you lost your natural mind?" Patricia had demanded, blocking Tara's car door like a church mother-shaped roadblock. "That man lied to you, got you nearly barbecued in your own home, had you testifying in federal court on national television, and now you want to drive 3 hours to visit him in prison?" "Yes," Tara had said simply. Why? It was a fair question. One Tara had asked herself approximately 800 times in the 6 weeks since Tim's sentencing. Why visit a man who'd deceived her? Why waste her time on someone serving 12 years for crimes she couldn't even fully comprehend? Why choose this particular hill to die on when everyone, her mother, her church family, even Pastor James, had made it abundantly clear she should walk away? Because, Tara had finally answered, "I told him nobody's too far gone for grace, and I need to know if I actually meant it, or if I only meant it when it was convenient." Patricia had stared at her for a long moment, then sighed and stepped aside. "You always were the stubborn one. Fine. But you call me when you get there and when you leave. You hear me?" "Yes, ma'am." "And Tara?" Patricia's voice had softened. "If you're gonna do this, if you're really gonna walk this road, you better be sure. Because people are gonna talk. They're gonna judge. They're gonna say you're crazy or desperate or brainwashed. You need to be ready for that." Tara had been ready. Sort of. The first visit had been awkward as hell. Tim had looked smaller somehow, diminished by the gray prison uniform and the fluorescent lighting that made everyone look vaguely deceased. His shoulder had healed, but he favored it still. And there were new lines around his eyes that hadn't been there 3 months ago. They'd sat across from each other in the visitor's room, cheap plastic table between them, corrections officer watching from the corner, and neither had known what to say. "You came," Tim had finally whispered. "I came." "Why?" "Because you took a bullet for me," Tara had said. "Because you gave up a reduced sentence to keep me safe. Because I stood in front of a federal jury and said I believed your guilt was real, and if I was telling the truth then, I need to see if your redemption can be real too. Tim's eyes had filled with tears he'd clearly been fighting. I don't deserve this. Probably not, Tara had agreed. But grace isn't about deserving. It's about receiving. So sit there and receive it, Martinez. He'd actually laughed, and something in Tara's chest had unclenched for the first time since the raid. That first visit had been 30 minutes. By month 6, they were talking the entire 2-hour visiting window. By year 1, Tara was writing him letters every Tuesday night after choir practice. By year 2, the media had caught wind of their story, and suddenly they were the criminal and the choir girl. A headline that made Tara want to throw things, but that Tim found oddly hilarious. We sound like a bad romance novel, he'd said during one visit, grinning despite himself. We basically are a bad romance novel, Tara had replied. We're just living it instead of reading it. People talked. Of course they talked. Some of the church mothers stopped speaking to Tara altogether. A few families left Hope Community Church, uncomfortable with their choir director's questionable associations. Her mother had needed 6 months and approximately 4,000 hours of prayer before she'd stopped trying to convince Tara to move on. But Sister Patricia had stayed. Pastor James had stayed. And slowly, quietly, some of the congregation had started to understand. Because what Tara was doing wasn't enabling or denial, or some misguided attempt to fix a broken man. What Tara was doing was bearing witness to transformation. And transformation, real transformation, takes time. Tim had enrolled in prison education programs. First a GED, he dropped out of college at 20 to help Carlos, then college courses through a correspondence program. Then, to everyone's shock, a theological degree. I'm studying the thing that saved me, he'd explained during year 3. Feels right. He'd started mentoring younger inmates, the kids who'd made the same stupid choices he had, who'd gotten caught up in crews and violence and the kind of desperation that makes crime seem like the only option. Tim talked to them about Carlos, about the cost of that life, about the people who ended up as collateral damage. I can't bring back the people hurt by the weapons I moved, Tim had told Tara during year 4. I can't undo the damage, but maybe I can stop some kid from making the same choices. Maybe that's what redemption looks like, not erasing the past, but making sure it doesn't repeat. Tara had written about that conversation in her journal, the one she'd started keeping to process this bizarre, beautiful, impossible journey. She'd titled the entry, What Grace Looks Like in Prison Grays. Year 5. Tim came up for early parole. He was denied. Tara had testified on his behalf, told the parole board about his education, his mentorship, the theological work he was doing. It hadn't been enough. The crimes were too serious, the victims too numerous. Tim had taken the denial with quiet grace that had broken Tara's heart. 3 more years, he'd said during their next visit. I can do 3 more years. We can do 3 more years, Tara had corrected. He'd looked at her, really looked at her, and asked the question that had been sitting between them for 5 years. Why are you still here, Tara? You could have moved on, found someone without a federal record, someone who didn't require a 3-hour drive and a metal detector to see. Why are you still choosing this? Because, Tara had said slowly, the first time I saw you, you were crying through, His eye is on the sparrow, like the song was the only thing keeping you alive. And I thought, that's someone who knows they need saving, not someone who thinks they're fine, not someone who's faking it, someone who knows they're drowning and is desperate for air. And I've been singing about grace my whole life, Tim, singing about redemption and second chances and God's impossible love. But if I can't actually believe in it when it's hard, when it's complicated and messy, and takes 8 years instead of 8 minutes, then what was I even singing about? Tim had reached across the table and taken her hand. It was against the rules the CO had started toward them immediately, but for 5 seconds, he'd held her hand and whispered, I love you. I've loved you since the first time you knelt beside me. I'll love you until I stop breathing. I know, Tara had said. I love you too. That's why I'm still here. Year 8. Tim came up for parole again. This time the board had a file, 3 inches thick, documenting his transformation, completion of a bachelor's degree in theology, mentorship of 47 at-risk inmates, 12 of whom had successfully completed their own education programs, letters from prison staff about his conduct, and testimony from Tara about his continued growth. The parole board had deliberated for 2 hours. When they'd emerged, the chairwoman had looked at Tim and said, Mr. Martinez, We're granting early release contingent on continued good behavior and mandatory participation in a re-entry program. You'll be released in 30 days. Tara had been sitting in the observation section, and she'd started crying so hard that Sister Patricia, who'd driven 3 hours to be there for the hearing, had to practically carry her out of the building. 30 days later, Tara stood outside Federal Correctional Institution Terre Haute, wearing the burgundy dress she'd worn the night they met. Her hair was styled the way she'd worn it that first Wednesday service. She'd even found the same shade of lipstick, though her hands were shaking too badly to apply it properly. Sister Patricia had offered to come. Tara's mother had offered to come. Half the choir had wanted to make the drive, but Tara had needed to do this alone. At 8:47 a.m., the prison doors opened, and Tim Martinez walked out. He was wearing donated clothes, jeans, and a plain blue t-shirt, carrying a plastic bag with his few possessions. And when his eyes found Tara standing by her car, he stopped walking. Just stopped, like he couldn't quite believe she was real. Tara crossed the parking lot in 12 steps she counted and threw her arms around him. Tim caught her, lifted her off her feet, buried his face in her hair, and they both cried like the broken, healing, impossible people they were. "You waited," Tim whispered against her neck. "Of course I waited," Tara replied. "I told you, nobody's too far gone for grace. Not even you." They married 6 months later at Hope Community Church. Sister Patricia cried through the entire ceremony. Pastor James officiated, his voice cracking when he said, "What God has joined together, let no man separate." Tara's mother, who'd finally come around, sat in the front row beside Carlos's mother, both women weeping into matching handkerchiefs. The choir sang Amazing Grace, because of course they did. The harmony was so perfect, so transcendent, that even the handful of reporters allowed inside. It had become something of a media event, despite their best efforts to keep it quiet, had stopped filming to just listen. When Tim kissed his bride, the congregation erupted in applause that sounded like thunder, like vindication, like grace made audible. Tim launched Second Chance Pathways within a year of his release. The program focused on re-entry support for former gang members and inmates, job training, education, resources, counseling, housing assistance, everything Tim had needed when he'd gotten out and had to piece together from donated clothes and Tara's relentless advocacy. Within 3 years, they'd helped 200 people successfully reintegrate. Within 5 years, they were operating in 4 cities. The work was hard. Some people made it, some didn't. But Tim showed up every day, using his story, the whole ugly, complicated, redemptive truth of it, to prove that change was possible. 7 years after his release, Tim Martinez stood at a youth conference on Chicago's South Side, facing an auditorium full of teenagers who looked exactly like he had at their age. Angry, desperate, convinced that crime was their only option. Tara sat at the piano behind him, her wedding ring catching the stage lights. "I came to church looking for silence," Tim said, his voice carrying across the packed auditorium. "I'd just lost my brother to the streets. I was drowning in guilt from the things I'd done, the people I'd hurt with, the weapons I'd moved. I walked into Hope Community Church because I needed somewhere quiet, somewhere the sirens and the gunshots couldn't reach me." He paused, glancing back at Tara. "God gave me a song, gave me a woman with a voice that could break your heart and heal it in the same breath. I came looking for escape, and God gave me a reason to stay. I came guilty, and I was guilty. Let's be clear, but God gave me grace." With her voice, her prayers, and her impossible, ridiculous, stubborn love, Tara played a soft chord progression, letting the music underscore his words. "Some of you are sitting there thinking you're too far gone," Tim continued, "thinking you've done too much, hurt too many people, made too many wrong choices. I'm here to tell you that's a lie. I had 15 federal warrants. I spent 8 years in prison. I lied to the woman I loved about everything, and I'm standing here today married to that woman, running a program that's helped hundreds of people because grace doesn't quit on you even when you quit on yourself." The auditorium was silent. "It won't be easy," Tim said. "Real change never is. But it's possible, and you're worth it. Every single one of you is worth the hard work of redemption." The applause started slowly, then built to something thunderous. After the conference, as they packed up to leave, a teenage boy approached Tim nervously. "Mr. Martinez, I wanted to say thank you. My brother's in Bruno's old crew. I've been thinking about joining, but after hearing you..." He trailed off. "Maybe I don't have to." Tim gripped the kid's shoulder. You don't have to. And if you need help getting out, you call this number. He handed over a Second Chance Pathways card. We're here. That's what we do. The boy nodded and left. Tara slipped her hand into Tim's. You reached him. We reached him, Tim corrected. None of this happens without you. None of this happens without Grace, Tara replied. We're just the messengers. They walked out of the auditorium into the Chicago evening, their wedding rings catching the streetlights, their impossible love story still unfolding one redeemed moment at a time. Because that's what Grace does. It kneels beside broken people and says, whatever's breaking you, you don't have to carry it alone. It waits 8 years in prison visiting rooms. It sings redemption into existence. It refuses to give up, even when giving up would be easier. Grace doesn't make sense. It's just what happens when love chooses truth over convenience, when hope chooses patience over despair, when two broken people decide that together, they might just become whole. If this story of impossible redemption moved you, hit that like button and subscribe for more stories about love that refuses to quit. Thank you for your time.